All right, welcome divas and dudes. I know dudes are out there somewhere probably watching. So great to have you all. We are in the middle of our series called Breakfast of Champions. And my goal is to show you lots of ways to think outside the box for breakfast. We've just kind of finished the Mediterranean and we've learned lots of interesting foods. If you've been to any of my classes, you know that one of my goals is to really help people kind of see where the nutrition world is taking them as far as marketing and merchandising. And we're still in the throes of, all different types of diets to help us meet our goals. And so we still kind of are in the habit of thinking that carbohydrates are bad and that we have to be careful and that, we should really avoid most of them. And so a lot of my teaching is to try to really put some light on that subject, really help us understand what do we mean by that. And surely there's some good carbs. And of course, you'll hear me say a resounding yes. But today, I wanted to show you kind of the opposite of what we did last week. Last week, we talked all about grains. We talked about how to make a bulgur. We talked about the berrylicious world of berries and ways to mix them into different foods and really have a functional breakfast with grains. And so today, I'm going to show you how to do a breakfast with no grains at all, no sugars, with the exception of a little bit of organic maple syrup. And yes, I do call that a distinctive sweetener. It's not really your traditional sugar, right? There was a big confusion, though, in the world when we had to start putting on the label added sugars. And the companies that make maple syrup and honey, of course, we don't make honey, we gather it from the beautiful bees, and the trees make the beautiful maple syrup. So these companies really complained because they said, no, this isn't adding sugar. This is a natural product that's been unadulterated, unrefined, unchanged. And they really felt that that was enough reason to not be put into that category of added sugar. So the debate goes on. They still want the public to know that even if it's a healthy sugar, it's still a sugar. And that really gets muddy, doesn't it? Because then we start thinking, well, carbohydrates are sugars. And then you just get into this little bunny trail of a slippery slope, and like, where do you stop? Do you even mention broccoli and lentils, because they have sugar too, and the body breaks them down enough? And so that's where, the nutrition world and health and wellness really have lots of confusion, frustration as far as how do we help the public know what is healthy. And so what I want to do here is just go over a little bit about the Breakfast of Champions. So first, we know that we want balance in our day. Balance in our day. So maybe not so much every meal. Gone are the days that we say, if you're following a plant-based diet, you've got to combine your proteins so that you can get all the essential amino acids in that one meal. And that's kind of been the case for a long time. We've realized, actually, that's not that important, because if you eat some proteins at one meal and it's maybe incomplete, it only has some of those essential amino acids, you can make up for it. And later in the day, we can use other foods that give us other amino acids, and it'll work out, because in our chemical soup, those amino acids float around for a while, so they don't immediately go away. So those amino acids hang out, the other ones come together, and our body is smart enough to hold on to them long enough so we can do the building that's required of those amino acids. So we want balance in our day. So the good news is breakfast can be a nice variety. It doesn't have to be an egg and a piece of toast and some fruit, right? And I'm going to jump to the next meal, which I'm going to talk about after our series on breakfast, and it's going to be lunch. And what is the archetypical lunch? Anybody want to guess? Salad for smarties. Sandwich, chips, and a cookie, right? No, not sandwich, chips, and a cookie. But we get trained that that's what it should be. Just like breakfast should be, oatmeal or an egg and toast, something like that. So we should have balance in our day. We absolutely want to have good variety, but we don't necessarily have to have it all at once and within the confines of what's expected. So as we think about what we've learned around the world, especially in the Mediterranean, what kind of non-grain foods comes to mind? Can you think of any? Miss Elaine just popped in. I bet she knows. Yes! What do I always talk about? Nuts and seeds, right? Because so many of our diets are lacking nuts and seeds. Why? Well, because in our culture, where we are truly driven by the almighty dollar and marketing, it really doesn't pay anybody very much to tell you to go eat some pumpkin seeds or some walnuts. It's just, that's a raw food. It doesn't really give us much profit. Now, of course, things are changing because now we've got the superfood category, and now we're charging enormous amounts for those humble seeds and nuts. So yeah, this landscape is changing. So let's just think about nuts and seeds in kind of a new light. Now we have the joy of nut flours and seed butter, right? So you're going to see how we come up with creations using nut butters. Thank you so much. And nut flours. Pretty cool. So maybe not so much in the Mediterranean diet, but this is where Americans are so good at taking an idea and maximizing it into maybe something not only profitable, but maybe even a step up on the health scale. If we're trying to go keto, for example, what grain do we have to leave out? Well, most of them, except what about ones from nuts? And so the eyebrows raise and we think, well, maybe so. Here's another one. Anybody want to guess if I told you this is grain-free, what is it? Ooh, both of them. Very good. It could be either one in this color. It happens to be cassava, but coconut works. When I started Powerhouse Bakery and we were really in the throes of a paleo diet, I put on my science cap and said, okay, I can do this. I want to figure out some ways to use a grain-free flour blend that's healthy, that's, full of flavor and has good texture because, we're going to leave out the gluten in the wheat and make something really good with it. So I, figured out we could certainly use some grain-free approaches. So coconut flour, then I used quinoa flour. I even used other nut flours. In most of my muffins, we're actually using hazelnut flour, which is a fabulous, rich source of all kinds of minerals. So really healthy. This one is a little bit newer on the block as cassava flour. Anybody know what the cassava plant looks like? Yeah, it does. It looks like a potato, which should tell your brain, potato means starch, right? So no grain flours don't always mean exactly what we think, because we automatically think, oh, no grain, it must be no carbs, right? What do you think I'm going to say about cassava flour? It does. It does have flour. It does have carbs in that flour. If we were looking at a calorie control issue, do you think that cassava flour or almond flour or hazelnut would be lower in calories? No. Do you think they would be lower in glycemic index? No? Not necessarily, right? Good thinking. Not necessarily. So let me just touch on this whole idea of glycemic index. So this is a number that's really telling our bodies how it's going to respond to a meal or specifically to a food. And I would be so happy for you to have a chair. Let's Amber, would you mind grabbing one from that closet and let her sit in here? I hate for you to have to stand. Glycemic index is giving us kind of this little, flashing neon sign to say, if you eat this food, it's compared to a slice of bread, your blood sugar is going to do this. So if we say, looking at a chart of time and volume, we're going to say, okay, over time, your blood sugar is going to go from 0 to 180. based on, 1 teaspoon or 1 slice of bread. So for 1 slice of bread, in a given amount of time, your blood sugar is going to go way up. Everything's going to be based on how our body responds to a slice of bread. Okay, now your science mind should go, okay, wait a minute, slice of bread with anything on it? Slice of bread first thing in the morning? Slice of bread in the afternoon? Slice of bread if you're overweight? Slice of bread if you're diabetic? Slice of bread if you're an athlete? Do you see all those factors? They're changing how we understand the glycemic index. So it's such a vague term. Uh-oh, I see a furrowed brow. Do you have a question? No, okay. Because we know that we can get some idea of a food, but glycemic index is so vague, it might lead to more questions than answers. Because our body will absolutely have a big impact on how we're going to respond to the amount of sugar in a slice of bread. So is there a takeaway? Is there some value with the glycemic index? The other piece of that puzzle is, do we ever eat a piece of bread by itself? Not usually. Do we ever eat other foods by itself so that we can assume the reaction will be the same? Not usually. We usually have a meal, right? We usually have things grouped together. So now the question will be, oh gosh, well, how is my blood sugar going to be affected by this carbohydrate if it's mixed in with some fats and some protein? Yeah, so are you following me? There's some questions there that really don't help us understand it. So instead, I say, let's just not worry at all about glycemic index. Let's put that away and instead look at, again, the balance of the meal. So what proteins are we getting? What carbohydrates are we getting? And also what fats? That's going to have a more realistic interpretation of how our body responds. The other thing, in addition to balance, and you're going to know this when you use your My Best Foods list, because I always say a really big part of making those foods go from good to great is determined by the portion. Yeah, the portion. Because if you have 3 cups of green beans or a half a cup of green beans, do you think that it would have an impact on your blood sugar? Probably. Maybe even short term. But yeah, volume matters. If you had 4 cups of spaghetti with meat sauce and cheese on top, your eyes should go, ooh, just by that thought. Your blood sugar is going to change more dramatically than if you had a half a cup of pasta with meat and cheese sauce, or meat on top with cheese. So portion, hands down, huge deal. So when you think about Thanksgiving dinner and everybody has to eat a little bit of everything because it's so good, it's just once a year, and you kind of overeat, and then everybody has to go take a nap, and they say, oh, it's because of that tryptophan in the turkey. I know, hilarious, right, Elaine? Do you think it's from the tryptophan in the turkey? No, exactly. What do you think it's from? Too much food. And sure, the carbs aren't going to help, but too much food. And yes, the carbohydrates do seem to have a more pronounced effect, because like if you had, specimen A, plate 9 inches, and you loaded it up with salad and maybe chicken, versus same specimen, plate 9 inches, and loaded up with stuffing, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, chances are you're going to get more sleepy. But it's not so much because of the carbohydrates, it's because of the calories. It's hard to overeat on, greens and chicken. So, okay, so did I beat that dead horse? I think you got it. So back to the whole idea of this meal that I want to create with no carbs at all. Knowing that now that I've just explained all that, we could still overeat and not be healthy, even though it has no carbs. Even though it has lots of seeds and nuts, it could still be something that anytime you overeat, it's too much. Even water. I think I've told you guys, I've had a client, this was years ago, and she drank too much water, and she developed serious side effects and damaged her bladder. Chronic cystitis from drinking too much water. I mean, who would have thought? Now, don't worry, she drank like 7 gallons a day, right? It was horrendous amounts. And her body just couldn't manage it. But so don't let anybody ever tell you that, you can eat or drink as much as you want, as long as it's healthy, because that's not exactly true. So if we want to do a breakfast of champions and we want to experiment with something that's a little out of balance, because we're going to try making something with very little or no carbs and maybe more nuts and seeds, knowing that the calories probably are more concentrated. Who remembers how many calories are in fats? Yes, per gram. Yes, awesome. 9 calories per gram in a fat. Anybody know how many calories per gram in a protein? Yes, we've got star students. 4 calories per gram. What about carbohydrates? Yep, 4 calories per gram. Protein and carbohydrates. So, even when we think about just the concentrated elements, is it a good idea to throw out the bun and eat just the burger? Probably not. If you're at a fast food place, who knows? But if you're making a burger at home and it's using some grass-fed beef, which is AKA high in fat, and we're going to try to lower our total health indicator, and we're going to throw away the bun. Did that help us? Not really, because this is calorie for calorie the lowest part of that meal, because the meat is going to be a good blend of this. So again, having carbs sometimes dilutes the calories in a meal. That's a concept. It dilutes the calories of a meal because almost all proteins are going to come with some fat. Can you think of any carbohydrate that comes with fat? I heard a whisper of avocado. Kind of, yeah, because, avocado is a fruit, so we automatically think fruit, but it's actually almost 99.9% fat. But yeah, can you think of any other carbohydrate that comes with fat? I've got one for you, edamame. And in layman's terms, not us nutrition and food experts, what is that also? Yeah, soybean. Edamame and beans. Beans are great, and that's this family. Beans have carbohydrates, protein, and fat all in one. Pretty awesome. So as we still go through and are considering our breakfast of champions, if we were to go, well, I'm going to get healthy, it's Easter, and I'm going to give up carbs, so I'm going to go keto. Because I'm going to get ready for my big chocolate bunny that I'm going to have in a couple of days. Kidding. But if we did keto, and we wanted to make a breakfast, and some people that follow keto are very strict, and they say, I'm only allowed 20 grams of carbs for the whole day. Does that sound like a lot or a little? Little, exactly. How many grams of carbs do we need in a day? Even more. Yes, 150. A typical woman in her 50s or 60s needs about 170 grams of carbs, about 50 grams of protein, right? And somewhere around 40, maybe 50 grams of fat. And, I don't want you to write this down and act like you're going to follow it, because I don't want you to count grams. I want you to think in macros, in big picture. I want you to think of great foods and being very aware of your body cues. But I think this is helpful because sometimes when we look at a label, because it puts it in context, is 20 grams a lot? Thank you are you going to check? Because it smells delicious. Do you guys smell that? That is the raspberry crumble that I'm going to show you. And will you bring the recipe when you come, Miss Amber? So the nice thing is, when we put it in context, we realize that carbs come from what food groups? Fruit. What else? Vegetables. What else? Grains. What else? Starchy vegetables. What else? Dairy products. lentils, beans, you know? So yeah, it should be the majority, because that should be the majority of the things we eat should come from foods that have carbohydrate. So as I keep going, I hope I'm debunking the idea that keto is going to make you feel healthy. Now, it might make you feel less bloated, and that depends on what you have been eating. If you've been eating a lot of French fries and going to fast food and having a Whopper with, you know, extra bun and cheese and burger, you probably just feel kind of yucky. And so cutting out volume will probably help you. Or if you have diabetes and you have a really hard time keeping your blood sugars in control, sometimes doing keto is a good approach. So now what I'm going to talk with you about is what I call clean keto. Clean keto. What do you think I mean by that? This is in the media quite a bit, and it's clean because if you've heard anybody that starts a keto diet and they have a weight loss goal, we'll say, and they say, oh yay, I'm going to follow the keto diet because I can eat all the steak and the bacon and the eggs and the cheese that I want. That would be the opposite of clean keto. Because if we're going to increase the amounts of saturated fats from cheese and beef, and we're going to get all the sausage and bacon that we want, which is loaded with chemicals, now what we've done is we've added a lot of bad stuff to our eating plan. Thank you, ma'am. Is it looking good in there? Yes, great. So the reality is, if it's clean, that means it's going to have more nuts and seeds, and it's going to be pretty much devoid of the stuff that we know doesn't help us be healthy. So chemicals, barbecuing, smoking agents, right? And so then the person that's getting ready to start keto goes, oh, darn. Wait a minute, that's not what I signed up for. I want to have barbecue all I want. And all I'd have to do is add my diet barbecue sauce, right? I know, and all your eyebrows should go up. No, that's going in the wrong direction, because non-nutritive sweeteners are what? They're chemicals. And so if we're getting rid of things like berries and maple syrup and coconut sugar and agave, and instead we're getting saccharin and erythritol and stevia and all these other chemicals. Now ideal is a blend, so you get, instead of one non-nutritive sweetener, you get a mix of all of them. That's adding a lot of chemicals to our soup, and I'm not sure that that's going in the right direction. And I love the story, and thank goodness my dad is still alive at almost 90. When I was a teenager, and I was so excited because Diet Coke came out. And I loved it. It was so cool to drink Diet Coke. And at the table, now this is the funny part, as he's smoking his cigarette, he's telling me how bad Diet Coke is for me. Right? Hilarious. Talk about the times. But he was right that now, 35 years later, we're starting to realize that the diet sweeteners probably were not a step in the right direction, albeit the same thing with his cigarettes, But it's the culture that we're steeped in that allows us to go on a trend thinking it's better. And that's exactly what's happening with a lot of diet types. We get some really smart people that tell us, this is good. Look what happened to these people. They now are healthy and beautiful and perfect. And because they followed that diet. Yes, ma'am.
I thought stevia was a plant-based sweetener. And you're saying it's chemicals?
So my feeling around any sweetener, even cassava and monk fruit, are made into sweeteners. It's a very different experience on your palate, and it's a very different experience physiologically. And I don't believe it's buying us a health move, a step in the right direction. And that's because what happens, if it's made with stevia, it's going to have a little bit of a bitter taste. So you might end up using more of it. That's one. Number two is our body and our taste buds seem to acclimate to the non-nutritive sweeteners. And so we want a little bit more. And then we also get this halo effect. Well, the cookies I ate had stevia in them, so I'm just going to have a few more. And so now your calorie range, whether we're going to call it the glycemic load or the calorie load or the bloating mode, all of those criteria confuse the issue. And I would much rather you use a nutrient that is made naturally by bees or by a maple tree, use a small amount of it, get a really pure, fantastic flavor, and enjoy that. If Americans used those kinds of sweeteners instead of white refined sugar, we would not be in the place we are today. I mean, there's just no doubt about that. So sweeteners got a bad reputation because of the volume of sugars consumed by people. So there we are again, by portion matters. Even if you didn't buy all this idea of, maple syrup and honey and you just ate white sugar, but you ate a very small amount, like they do in Europe. Europe, diet sweeteners are not used. But people are not obese as much as they are in the US. So the reality is we have overdone our portions, and we've muddied up the issue by thinking that we can cure everything with a sweetener that comes from a natural root. And I beg to differ.
Are you saying use coconut sugar or something that's natural?
I would rather you use a sweetener that the flavor equals the calorie level, and it has not been modified in such a severe way so that it's very different. Now, in fairness, coconut sugar is pretty different, right? I mean, you see a coconut, it doesn't look anything like that bag of sugar. So that's a fair issue. Some people say agave is not organic or it has pesticides in it. There's always going to be some naysayers. So even if you don't like the idea of coconut sugar and you used any sort of sweetener in a smaller volume, you're going to win. Again, honey and maple syrup are one of those that are pretty pure. So there's plenty of those kinds of choices out there that will really help you. Like here at Powers Bakery, we use fruit juices to sweeten a lot. And that's a great way to do it. Sometimes when I have you, build a salad, what do I love to put in there to add a little punch of sweetness? A little bit of fruit. A couple pieces of watermelon, or maybe some raspberries or sliced strawberries, right? And so it adds a wonderful interest and intrigue to the palate. So the salad is yummy and you want to eat it. Yeah. Any other questions?
So I used to put stevia in my coffee, and I ran out of stevia, and then I came to your class and you're saying that stevia is not good. So I just thought I'll just put the organic creamer in there,
Yeah.
It doesn't have the same taste. I just gave up.
Oh, shoot.
Date palm sugar also works well. It has a low glycemic index.
So what we want to...
About the barbecue,
Yes.
are you saying that anything barbecued is not a good idea, or just when someone like really chars it and gets that dark stuff on there?
Both. There's a gradient. So the question is, I think both of them are really good. Let's talk about them again. The barbecuing and the sugar. Volume and frequency have a big impact. So if you grill and you want to do it more often, and how we're going to fix that fact that we like frequency? Well, we're going to do a little adjustment in how we're going to barbecue. So if we're going to go up in frequency, we want to go down in the charring. So we might say use some foil to protect the food from the grill. For food protection. You could also do less time on the grill, so decrease time on grill and finish it off in the oven. Finish in oven. So finishing it in the oven means that we're getting less of that total exposure, because if we want to increase the frequency, we want to decrease the exposure. So now let's do that same idea with sugars. Say I mean, coffee is so sensitive to people. It's like, don't mess with my morning coffee, right? And so even if we say, okay, let's use your favorite creamer or your sugar and your creamer. And we're going to say, okay, I still want to have it every morning. So my frequency is up. How am I going to improve the way the sugar is going to impact my body? Because remember, this whole continuum is really about how much exposure our bodies get to potential carcinogens. We know that grilling and that browning color, going from a little bit brown to blackened to just grill marks to, all over black, to adding a sweet barbecue sauce that causes more browning to happen. The animal is high in fat, so now you've got fat and sugar changing the chemical structure. So all of those things make grilling higher risk. If you want to do it more often, you're going to have to change something. The type of marinade, getting a super lean meat, cooking it less on the grill, finishing in the oven. So now with sugar, same idea. If we want to do our coffee every morning and make it sweet, how about if we use a better sweetener? So we could use honey, we could use maple syrup. No, not going to happen. Okay, so now the other one is you want to keep it the same way. Now you want to use less. So now we have a choice of use less or use better, right? Better sugar. She says, no, don't mess with my coffee. Then I say, then how about less? Because the nice thing is, even if, you say you have been using 2 teaspoons or 2 packets, and you try 1.5, that's not a big change. Your palate will go, okay, I think I can do that. Stay with that for 6 months. Plenty of time for your taste buds to go, you know what, this is fine. I think I can go down to 1 packet now. You got time. Make sure that it works so that you're not feeling cheated, that you still like your item, and you're using less. Okay? So other questions. So now we see that sugar impacts our body with potential carcinogens, especially if it's bleached white sugar. Potential carcinogens, there isn't a lot in sugar, except some would say that the bleaching agent is really bad, and the nutrients are taken out when it's bleached. And, coconut sugar and maple syrup do, in fact, have quite a few minerals. So, now we look at a comparison of changing the sugar, bleaching it, taking out everything, so it kind of becomes a negative food, versus another one that if you can learn to like the flavor, it has a little more of a metallic flavor when there's minerals in it. Have you noticed that? Coconut sugar, maple syrup has sort of a metallic flavor. Well, that's because of the minerals. So if you can get used to that, it's a win. So now what I want to show you is this little blend of goodies. My hope was to take you kind of through the scenario of sweetening it with a little bit of fresh berries. So yeah, that's going to give us a little bit of carbohydrates. So, the very strict keto diet person might say, nope, I can't even have raspberries. And I would say, gosh, I feel really sad for you, right? So raspberries, and then a very small amount of maple syrup. So, the hope is that even our friends and family that aren't necessarily on as much of a health kick as we are could go, hey, this is kind of good. The other items that I have on the table, I always am such a strong believer in adding citrus. So zest and juice, always. So that's going to go into it. And then I've got some crunchies. I've got slivered almonds, and I've got all of the beautiful seeds. So this is my creation, the Mighty Seed Blend. Anybody remember what's in that?
Chia, flax, hemp.
Yes, those 3, chia, flax, and hemp. 1-to-1 ratio. So I make a blend of this one. Now, flaxseed is rich in isoflavones, phytoestrogens. Those are things that we want to include in our body as a weak form of estrogen, so that the stronger, more potent form doesn't get to attach onto our receptor sites. Okay, so flax is good. But I use less of flax in a lot of the cooking because it has a bit of a stronger flavor. the lignans and the essential omegas are kind of a strong flavor. So I added a little more of the hemp hearts and a little more of the chia seeds. And then, of course, my favorite sweet spice also goes into this dish. Anybody remember what that is? Hopefully you can smell it. Cloves, allspice, cinnamon, cardamom. Yes, all of those. Oh my gosh, it smells so good. Because remember, with just this little bit of sweetener and a bit of the fruit, if I don't add something else, chances are it'll leave my palate lacking. It'll be wanting something. Now, I do have a good amount of crunch, so there's a good chance that crunch and a little bit of citrus and a little bit of sweet is going to make a win product. Now, this recipe is a version. I kind of added my own touches to it, but the Colin Campbell Center for Science in the, Colin Campbell, PhD, he wrote a book all about eating more plant-based. And so if you're interested in this website, he does a great nutrition website. And so if we could create something that is grain-free, sugar-free, and of course rich in nutrients, this could be one. And really his whole website talks about this idea. And so I got one very similar to this from his site, and then I kind of added my own version. So I'm going to write down the recipe. So do copy this one down, because this is one that I think you're going to absolutely want to try at home. And as soon as it's out of the oven, Amber's going to give you samples so you can try it. But here is the recipe for a berry, so hopefully raspberry, but again, use whatever berries sounds good. You can use blackberries. Some people don't like the seeds in those berries, so blueberries works, right? So 3 cups of fresh berries and 1/3 cup of maple syrup. Now, let me just mention, this is not log cabin syrup, right? It is the pure maple syrup. So yeah, it's going to cost a little bit more, but just like all foods, when they are a small crop, not mass production, it's going to be a little bit more. So chia seeds, 2 tablespoons. So TBSP is my way of abbreviating tablespoons. So 2 tablespoons of chia, and then also 2 tablespoons of hemp. So I'm just going to write each. So 2 tablespoons each of chia seeds and hemp seeds. And then here is 3 tablespoons of the Mighty Seed blend. So if you don't have the Mighty Seed blend, and you're going to buy chia, hemp hearts, and flax for this recipe, just make another little bowl and do equal parts of chia, hemp, and flax. Mix them all together. Put them in a cute little bowl and label them Mighty Seed blend. And then take some of that out and add it to the recipe. Okay? And then lemon juice and zest. So I would say at least 1 lemon. At least 1 lemon. And then some sweet spice. So 2 teaspoons of sweet spice. Now, what if you don't have sweet spice? Well, run over to Powerhouse Bakery and get some. Or order some, because I never seem to keep it in stock. Or you can make your own. And it's just make sure that you get some really nice, fresh jars of star anise. Grind it up yourself. Cloves. Grind it up yourself. Anise. Grind it up. And have some little containers that you keep those individual spices, and then blend them together and make your own sweet spice. Now in mine, I do add a little bit of coconut sugar also to kind of extend those spices, because they're sometimes strong. But you don't have to. You know, if you know your palate, you can certainly do it as strong as you like. Okay?
Does coconut sugar have any oil in it?
No. Good question. Not really, no. As long as you make the recipe while the berries are still frozen. Really important to mix them up while they're still frozen.
Well, why did that last week and did that yogurt.
Good.
The pomegranates were like crunchy, like are they supposed to be crunchy?
Well, they have seeds in them. They have seeds in them. So if you don't like that seedy part of the pomegranate, you can use a different fruit. I love that. And when you mix it in with the bulgur and other grain, it all kind of makes it a nice texture. But it's something you kind of have to get used to. Don't spit out the pomegranate seed. If you don't like that, just trade it into another veggie. A fruit. Yeah, that's a great question. You don't like seeds either. They're so good for your body, though. I'm telling you, don't lose them if you can. You have this because I'm going to now give you the second part, which is the crumble and the crust. So that is the part that's going to be the mix on the top. And then we're going to have a crumble that goes on top of that. So the crust is, again, going to be no grain. And it's going to be with nut flours and cassava flour and, of course, a little bit of the sweetener. And you're going to divide it in half. So you've got a crust and you have a crumble. So you're just going to divide it after you mix it. So you've got 1 1/3 cups of almond flour. There's quite a few different types of almond flour. So there isn't a big difference in this particular recipe. In some, it's going to make a big difference if you get fine or not fine. This is quite fine. Some of it's more granular. So this recipe, again, it doesn't matter. So 1 1/3 cup, and then 1/3 of a cup of almond butter. And here's a new one, sun butter. Have you ever heard of sun butter? Maybe I can talk Amber into bringing, she's serving up, which is way more important. Sun butter is made out of sunflower seeds, and it looks just like almond butter. Same little jar, same need to stir it up, and it looks like this. So sun butter and almond butter. These were brand new tubs, and so notice that I didn't mix them up real well. Take your time and mix them with a really good knife. Scoop it from the bottom up, because you don't want any dry, hard section at the bottom that you get to at the end and it's not very tasty. So you could even store it upside down, and that gets the oil to move up to the top, and you can stir it around. Oh, you doll, thank you. Yeah, so I want to pass this around because this sun butter is kind of hard to find at H-E-B. It's usually at the very top or the very bottom. And I love it. I love cooking with it. I love it on my toast. It's wonderful on apples, wraps. So good.
So you can use it like peanut butter?
Yes. Yes. You do, Irene?
With my Ezekiel bread, and I'll put blueberries on top.
Ooh, that sounds good. Oh my gosh. I love that. So sun butter and berries on top as her toast in the morning. Way to go, girl.
Almond butter and 1/3.
Yes, 1/3 each. So here we go. Each of sun butter and almond butter. And then 1/2 cup of maple syrup. So yes, this is going to cause the sugar grams to go up if we have to count maple syrup as sugar, which let's do, We're not so keto that we can't count it. Now, if you were diabetic and you're thinking, gosh, I can't have 1/2 cup of maple syrup in something, and I would say, yes, you can. Have a small amount, because the glycemic index of this particular dish is going to go way down. Why do you think? Because it's loaded with fats. Nuts and nut butters, and yeah, so you still can, you just have a small amount like anybody else, small amount. So pure maple syrup, I got that, and now Himalayan sea salt. And here we go, cassava flour. And just if you want some extra add-ins, maybe some added chopped nuts and seeds.
On the flour, is there an amount?
Yes, I'm getting there. You're ahead of me, girl. No, I'm kidding. 1/2 cup of sea salt. I'm sorry, 1/2 cup of cassava flour, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, And then, as much nuts and little goodies at the top that you want. Okay, so I'm going to mix it for you, and I'm going to pan it up for you, because you're going to see that it's kind of a messy recipe. So, with clean hands, you can certainly use your own hands, and you can use a mixer. I highly recommend for the first part. But the nice thing is, once you get everything mise en place, so everything kind of separated out, it's kind of fun, because now we just get to mix and enjoy kind of the textures that we're creating. So let's get started on the mix. So the first thing we're going to do is make the crust and the crumble. So in my food blender, my KitchenAid here, which I absolutely love. Does anybody have one of these at home? Yes, no, yes? You need to get one, Irene. You tell your hubby you want one. And he's gonna tell me just what I need to do. So we're gonna add the almond flour, which is 1.5 cups. So I'm gonna put that in. And what's next? Well, let's do the flours together. So I'm gonna move down here. I should have done that in a better way. So 1/2 cup of cassava. So here's my cassava. And I'm going to stir those around a little bit. I always really encourage to mix as you go. And now I'm going to add in my salt. And it's a 1/2 teaspoon, right? Okay, 1/2 teaspoon. So pretty dry. Only dry ingredients, right? Now the next thing I'm going to do is start adding in my wet ingredients. So the almond butter and the sun butter. So I like this little spatula. It works out great. So I'm just going to drop it in the center. Thank you, ma'am. Be careful, because some almond butters have sugar added. It's really hard to find ones that do not have it added extra sugar. And I don't know why that is, but it is. Disappointing, because it doesn't need to have added sugar. Anybody have a peanut butter that they like that has no added sugar? If you've been around me much, I will have told you about Laura Scudder's. You make your own. Excellent, Seema. Yes. Yes. There you go. Exactly. Yeah, so you don't even... Same thing, right? Same thing.
No. 100 milligrams of sodium equals to 230 milligrams of salt.
So now we're... But in the label, it's going to be the kind you measure out. Okay, so now I'm going to slowly mix this, and then once I get all the ingredients together, I'm going to share it with you so you can see. I'm putting the nut butters and the almond flour and the cassava in first, a little bit of the salt. And if you've ever made a pie crust, it's going to look similar. It's got little beads. Little beads. I like to mix this up first and then add the maple syrup. All right. And how much maple syrup?
1/2 cup.
Exactly, 1/2 cup. Okay. And now my seeds and nuts are going to go into my berries. So I'm going to do those last. And my add-ins I'm going to put in just about at the end here too. Here's my sweet spice. I'm going to save a little bit of the sweet spice and put it in with my raspberries also. Okay, so I want you to see how it's kind of on the dry side, which is good. I'm going to be able to add it as a really nice crumble. So you see it's kind of like a dough, not a batter. It's on the dry side, which is definitely a good thing.
That's the crust, right?
Yes, this is the crust.
The sweet spice is in the berry thing.
I know, I put a little in both. I cheated, I admit it. Now we're also going to add some add-ins to this, right? What add-ins should we do? Because I've got pumpkin seeds, which I love to add in. And again, it's just going to give me a little more crunch. And maybe a little bit of slivered almonds. Give me a little bit of crunch. So now I'm just going to mix it with a spoon. I could put it back on the mixer, but you know, it's really meant to be kind of a chunky nice mixture that is pretty much just going to absorb the juices from the berries. So it's not a wet batter at all. There, that looks beautiful. So see how the seeds and the almonds are kind of sticking in there? Not really great. I'm going to move my KitchenAid off now, and I'm going to press it into my pan. And the wider your pan, to me, the better. Why do you think that is? Yeah, it's thinner, and it makes you get a smaller piece, right? That's always smart. Ooh, sorry. That's always a smart way to go. Small piece matters. So now in my dish here, oh, I forgot the lemon juice, right? No, it goes into I was just checking, make sure you guys are watching. That goes in the fruit. And I do like it, again, when it's a little bit on the dry side, because then you get to really enjoy all the fruit juices. So I'm going to put about half of it out. So if you've ever had my berry crisp here at Powerhouse Bakery, it's very similar, except that recipe has oats. But the similarity is that it's a lot of fruit and almost no sugar at all, and then just having half of the topping going on the bottom and half going on the top. So yeah, that's good. I'm not even going to make it too much like a crust, because it's going to melt together, and when I serve it, it becomes really a soft, beautiful look. So that's about it. Okay, so now I'm going to move this aside and mix my berries. Actually, I could just leave them in this. So I'm going to have to ask Miss Amber, because it looks like I forgot my extra amount of maple syrup. But here's the sweet spice. Would you mind bringing some maple syrup? I left out my berries. Thank you, ma'am. And here's my seeds. So what I love about adding the seeds is it's going to really help it stick together. If you've ever had my Parker bars, the chias soaked in cherry juice becomes the whole cement that holds everything together. So here's my extra seeds. So after this class, I don't want you to ever wonder what you can do with your hemp hearts, right? Because you can do all kinds of things. And so now I'm going to use my beautiful fruit, and I'm going to zest it first. I'm going to have to ask my dear to bring me my zester as well. So while she's doing that, I'm going to do a little extra. This is not on the recipe, so exclusive just because you're at Powerhouse Bakery. I'm going to add some orange zest also. So add that to your notes, because I think you're going to love adding this addition. Thank you. Oh, you're awesome, Mary. So even if I didn't want to use all the maple syrup, do you think I could use orange juice as a sweetener instead? Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Just a half a cup will be perfect. If you pour some in for me, that'd be great. So I'm going to do, I don't know, probably 3 tablespoons of orange juice. And I'm going to reduce the amount of maple syrup if I wanted to. That would give me a little less sweetener, but a whole lot of citrus punch. Thank you, my dear. Pour it in. There we go. And now we'll do the orange and the lemon zest. So always zest first. If you're going to get that beautiful skin off, do that first. Get as much of the zest as you can. And even save a little bit to the very end. It just adds such a beautiful flavor. And Amber, you can go ahead and pass around the little samples while I'm making this, because I know she's finished it. And I know we're almost out of time, so I want you to get to see the finished product. But don't forget to use ample lemon juice. Even if you wanted to buy some good quality lemon juice in a little jug, I would do that, because lemon juice is so important. So now you're getting a beautiful sample of this one that I made just a few minutes ago, just before we started class. I saw a seed, so sorry, I have to get that guy out. So now look at the beautiful moisture that's in those raspberries. And the seeds are going to just hug every one of those raspberries and make it so delicious. Okay, so now I'm going to make a little room, and I'm going to layer them together. So berries are going to go right on top of that loosely assembled crust. Doesn't this look gorgeous? And it's not hard at all to make. Even if I didn't use the food processor, I could mix that together just with a spoon. So this is going to be loaded with minerals. It's going to have all kinds of healthy fats, all kinds of protein from nuts and seeds, no grain at all. I'm going to top it off with my last little bit of the crumble. So I'm just kind of rubbing it between my fingers, just allowing it to kind of fall in little clumps all around those raspberries. And again, you could formally roll this out if you wanted to and make it really fancy. You could chop up nuts and use that in the mix if you wanted to, instead of using the larger slivers of almonds. But I just think this looks rustic. It looks so pretty. You could serve it with a little dollop of coconut whipping cream. Again, not low in calories. So a small amount will do ya. And now you are good for the day. Look at how beautiful that turned out. So what do you think? Did you guys get to have some of you have had your sample? Yay! Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me and talking about Breakfast of Champions.